back again with the 3099 restoration. In the meantime, I've cleaned up the body, so most of the paint specks are now disappeared. I used some of this Humbrol enamel matte to touch up the scratches and the specks that didn't come off, so it's looking quite respectable. But I did that last night, so that's all nice and dry now. I'll give it a treatment with ballistol in a minute, and the electrical system is all back together again. So the reverse relay, that's all working nicely. It looks like new again. Oh, before I do that, I need to install the traction tyre. So that's, according to the spare parts list, it's 7152. So let's find 52. That's this size. Now I should have put this on before I installed the valve gear, because I've got to somehow get in there. I'll take all that off again. Wrong size. In order to get it on, you have to remove the rod. Best way to do that is, so with tweezers, hook it around. So in this case I'm starting at this behind here, hook it around there, and then run the tweezers around the rim on the inside of the band, and then it should pop into the groove that it sits in. So this one was actually quite quick and painless, so that means I can put this back together. So you quite often see valve gear installed incorrectly, where this joint is facing upwards. It'll still work, but just not as well. And the flat side of the pin that I mentioned the other day with this tab gives it the orientation, because it actually needs to be just off the center of the wheel. So now the other side. It'd be easier if the valve gear wasn't there, but I'm trying to not take that off again completely, if I can help it. You want to be sure that you're not twisting it either. Okay, it looks like that's just going to be too fiddly. So I'll show you that a bit better. So I'm holding it over the edge there and just running, and then a couple of times around to even out the tension. And you want to make sure it's not twisted. So what I was saying before, it could end up like that. With this going up. So that's wrong. It needs to be like that. And when you're putting nuts or screws into bolt holes, you want to go as if you're undoing it until you can feel it mesh the thread, because if you get it cross-threaded, it'll strip the whole thing and then you need spare parts. So we can do a quick track test. Okay, the reverser has an issue. Just slightly adjust the tension on it. So basically this coil here is wired in parallel with the motor, so it always has power on when the motor has, but this spring is calibrated to overcome the magnetism and not allow this part, the armature, to move in. But when you give it the reversing pulse, there's a stronger magnetism than the spring, and it'll switch, and then it toggles between these two contacts. And then the field coil is actually two coils, and the middle end is connected to the motor here. So the middle ends of both, and then one of these two wires here is connected to right in the middle, or the beginning of the inside coil, and the other one is connected to the outside of the outside coil. So only one of the two is activated through this switch here, and that inverts the polarity in the coil, or the field magnet rather. And so you get the power from the pickup through the I'm not sure what the English, Drossel in German, sorry. Not sure what that's called in English. And it goes through this brush, through the armature, out of that brush, through this coil, and via this switch to the chassis and the wheels, and back to the transformer. So that's how it works. And then from this point also connects to the light here. And in these, so that's the armature shaft here. I've put a bit of felt on both sides into the little pocket, so that absorbs some oil and just keeps it lubricated, because you don't want to have an excess of oil. Like, I was quite generous, but I'm continually wiping up excess that comes out. So it needs to be lubricated but not drowning in oil. And you never really want to get any oil into the motor itself, because that'll just mix with carbon dust from the brush and create a huge mess. The ski pickup was fairly new, just needed a bit of a polish and straightening, and yeah, so it doesn't switch every time, which is a bit annoying. Or it does it twice. What's going on here? Seems to do it several times. It's a bit strange. Oh yeah. So if with this arm here, you can put a screwdriver in there and give it a slight twist to bend that away from the spring. It'll increase the tension, and turning it the other way will decrease the tension on this spring. Because there's a fine line between, when you're doing high speed, sometimes it'll engage, so that means the spring is too loose if it engages at high speed. but if you tighten it too much, then it has this problem that it doesn't switch properly. So it's kind of a bit finicky. Okay, I think that's acceptable. I'll put that to one side and this to one side. So the smoke deflectors, I've straightened those out, and now the one on this side, I actually managed to break the tab as I was taking it apart. So it comes through to the inside and there it comes out, and it's bent over and I couldn't get it out, so it broke. But it's still kind of long enough to reach to the hole and slightly inside, so it'll be fine. It just isn't anchored properly at the top, that's all. So what I could do would be to solder a strip of sheet metal to extend that onto it. I might actually do that, and then I've got a tab, and it has these little notches here. I'm not sure if you can see them. There's little tabs on either side. They actually stop it sliding in too far. So they're little stoppers that keep the distance at the top. And then the tabs will just get folded around, which this one had a bit of rust on it, and now it's missing a lot of paint. I'm still debating whether I should paint that or not, or leave it as it is. But in any case, the Lichtleiter, so this piece that distributes the light into the headlights, needs to go in after the tabs are folded down, so because otherwise it'll be in the way. And it's this plastic is very delicate, so if you ever need to take that out, it'll break quite easily. So before I put polystyrene onto there, I want to glue this plastic detail part back on there first. So for this, I've got some super glue. And a pin, because it just seems it's a new tube, so it's quite happy to flow out in excess. And it goes on pointing upwards. So I'm just applying a little bit of glue to the connecting points. Bob's your uncle. So a little tip, once you've opened a super glue, store it with the opening at the top. That way it doesn't clog the spout, what's it called, the nozzle. Now, polystyrene. This is really the wonder stuff, as you'll see in a minute. for restoring tired paintwork. I'm just using a cheap brush to distribute it and get it into all the nooks and crannies. It's got a very peculiar smell. The buffers, which are turned steel pieces, I cleaned the rust off those with a Dremel, and this polystyrene is just going to seal the surface and keep it preserved. And it's safe to use on plastic as well as metal. Just going to do that side for now, and then go over it with cotton buds and wipe most of it off again. Or you can use these makeup removal pads, although they have a tendency to shed fibres quite a bit. So what was quite tired and dull paint before is now polished and shiny. I shall finish that off camera. So what next? So the chassis is back together. I need to clean up the front bogie. The coupler is a bit bent, but it's not quite broken, so I should be able to restore that without damage. And the elephant ears, I think I'll just leave it as is because it's part of the history of it. Like, this is the valve rod that I fixed yesterday, and it's lost its red paint anyway because it was quite rusty, so I'm just going to leave that as it is as well because it's never going to be a perfect engine. And then the tender, I did actually manage to get this step straightened out without breaking it. I'm going to take that apart, wash the top of it in warm soapy water, and then also put this polystyrene stuff on it so it'll come up. Looking like that. And it'll match the paint on the engine. Right, see you next time.